Hi, everybody. Welcome to Startups Uncensored number 28. The biggest noticeable difference is this is the first official Startups Uncensored we are not doing in Santa Monica. Round of applause for the West Side. And to UCLA helping us out here. For those, how many of you, this is your first Startups Uncensored event? Get out of town. Get out. No, really, get out of here right now. I want you to get up. Never been to one before. There have been 27 of these, and this is the first time you show up? Wait, that's great. That's awesome. And how many of you have been to a Startups Uncensored event? I think some of you are raising your hand twice. So I'm just like, I don't know. It seemed like too many hands went up both times. I'm not sure. But if this is your, how many of you have been to more than 5 of these events? I love you guys. Look at that. Look at that. Look at the love here. Look at the love here. For those of you whose first time it is for one of our events, my name is Jason. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called DocStock. And DocStock is one of the most visited websites in all the world now. We get about 20 million people a month coming to it. And we have 25 million registered members. We're based here in Southern California, right in sunny Santa Monica. Although a lot of times it's less sunny there than it is here on the west side, which is weird because I live right by here and I drive down there and it's sunny here and it's not there. I'm like, what's going on? And what we do is we help small businesses. We help people that are starting and growing small businesses. We have the widest selection of documents you need to start and grow a business. We have videos. We have courses. We got lots of cool stuff. If you don't know DocStock, you are missing out big time. We did a seminar earlier today on how to start a business that was 8 hours. Fun, jam-packed, good time. We loved it. And now what we're going to be doing tonight is number 28 in our series. And what we do with our Startups Uncensored events is we bring together on a monthly basis some of the most interesting CEOs, investors, people in the tech space, luminaries in business, to have a panel with them, to have a Q&A chat with them. So you all get a chance to hear from these really successful, amazing people that are out there doing really cool things in the entrepreneurial space. And then afterwards, we break, we do a mixer. We're going to have some food here afterwards for everybody. And it's just a chance to coalesce the Southern California tech community, entrepreneurs, techies, the whole group here. And it's great to see so many new faces. Thanks for coming out. There are a couple folks that are sponsors of the event that help us put us on so that there was no charge for tonight. The first is TriNet in the back. Melissa, check her out over there raising her hand. Give them a big round of applause. TriNet is the absolutely best company to do everything HR. We use them for our payroll. We use them for everything HR. We love them. If you've got a company with 5 or more employees, you're trying to figure out the best way to get all your HR done, she and their company is the place to go to. One of the things I do is I will never recommend or bring on any sponsored events that we don't use, and I can tell you I love these folks. And Melissa and her company, TriNet, is one company I love, so she'll be outside afterwards. We've got cybercoders. Where are you at? My cybercoders friends in the back there, Marnie and our new friend over there. And if you don't need to clap for them. It's okay. I didn't say clap for them. I just said recognize them. But cybercoders, if you are looking for tech talent, if you're looking for the best recruiters, these are my absolute favorite recruiters. They've helped us place a lot of our developers. I loved working with them. Long 4 or 5 year relationship with them. We've got our PR firm, Moxie Communication. Will my Moxie friends stand up? If you guys are looking for help with PR, those are the gals to go to. And to prove that they deliver, we're going to be on Fox Business News this Friday. And I'm going to steal Scott's outfit and wear his shoes that he's going to let me borrow. We have a bet. If tonight goes well, I'm going to make a bet to take Scott's shoes. Those actual shoes, he's going to have to walk out of here just in his socks. And who else am I missing on the sponsor side? I think I got everyone, right? If you're a sponsor and gave us money for the event and I didn't mention you, speak now, forever hold your peace. All right, that's wonderful. So we're going to jump right into things. Scott Case is the CEO of Startup America. Startup America is an amazing, amazing initiative to help provide a set of resources and knowledge to high-growth startups. It's sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. A lot of times people think that it's a government program. I, in fact, thought it was a government program until about 48 hours ago when I was updated that it wasn't. But it does a lot of work with the government. They work with the Obama administration. They work nonpartisan across party lines. And basically the main goal is to help drive initiative and create more high-growth businesses here in the United States. So we're really lucky to have Scott. He was the founding CTO of Priceline, that little company. He's really good buddies with William Shatner, so if you want to get some William Shatner stories, like tonight, we're going to break them open. So please, everybody, give me a warm Startups Uncensored number 28 welcome for Scott Case.
I have to pry him off my dead feet.
And as you know, I like the pressure. You got to go for the gold.
Go for it.
As you know, we'll open up the event later on to Q&A. So we'll do about an hour right now, just kind of off the cuff. Scott has not gotten any of the questions that I have planned for him. He does not know what's in store in my grilling Mike Wallace style here for Startups Uncensored. But we're going to open it up to the audience. Scott's like, hey, maybe we should let folks pitch our business. I'm like, that sounds awesome. Scott also agreed to give $1 million of his personal money tonight to the business that he likes best. He may not have agreed to that. I can't remember exactly. But we're going to have some fun here tonight, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun. And thank you all for coming out. It's great.
So let's start off, because I think that you can do a much better job than I can. What is Startup America, and why did you want to get involved with it?
So Startup America is a private sector-led program that was launched about 1.5 years ago in partnership with the White House, the Kauffman Foundation, and the Case Foundation, all about stepping up America's startup game. The whole economy is really driven by young, high-growth companies. So just as an example, quick raise of hands, how many people in the room have a company that is starting that's less than 5 years old? Okay. So really critical, basically the entire room, good job. It's always good to have the audience aligned with the guest. So if you're here for like the dog training, I think that's in the hallway next door. So here's why it's so critical to our economy. All of the net new jobs in the last 30 years were created by growing companies that are less than 5 years old. So the companies that are in the room, you all are the drivers of the economy, and I'll come back to that thematic in a minute. But the whole notion of Startup America is we've got to step up our game because the rest of the world is figuring out all about this entrepreneurship and innovation stuff. And they've been watching us, and they're building their own startup economies. And that's good for all of us. I just like to be slightly better than everybody else. Just a small competitive thing that I think we ought to have as a country. And so what we've done, and the reason I got involved in this is that I've been a startup junkie my whole life. Started companies in high school, started them in college, we founded Priceline. I've built companies since then. And the notion of what we can do to really focus on this category of company. And it's a challenge because if you look at most of the business, whether you look at it through the media, or you look at it, frankly, in schools. Here we are at UCLA, at the school of, you get a management, an MBA, right? It's basically a management degree. It's not a startup degree. So small businesses have dominated, and there tend to be companies that are not high growth companies. And then you have large companies, and we talk about them, and we assume that startups somehow are small companies that magically become large companies. But the reality is that nobody in this room, I would probably guess, is striving to create a small business, right? Anybody here striving to create a small business? Okay. Our ambitions as founders are to create big businesses. And what we need to do is to get everybody in the country to recognize that. And what we've done at Startup America, we talk more about the specifics, is try to focus on this category of company. High growth companies, young, less than 5 years old, multi-industry, and all across the country, focused on growth, led by founders who are driving for scale. And so with that said, I'd like all the people who are starting one of these kinds of companies just stand up really quickly. Come on, stand up. I'll stand up with you. Come on, stand up. Seriously. You're going to be sitting for a while. You might as well get to standing up now. All right, let's give yourselves and everybody in the room a round of applause. Because you guys are really the heroes of our economy. So all the bullshit you hear about job creators, it's you guys growing your businesses that actually matters. Everything else is kind of irrelevant. So thank you for doing what you do. And what we're trying to do at Startup America is to give you
By the way,
a
next
voice.
time I would prefer if you said Simon Says before you ask the audience. to take a physical action.
There'll be, Simon Says, one of these jobs. Okay. So the whole idea here is can we focus on this category of company that has, we've basically been a natural athlete as a country for 200 years. In fact, if you look at every city in America, largely founded by entrepreneurs. In fact, we talk about our founding fathers as founders. They were the same kinds of people that are in this room here that saw something nobody else saw, and that's true across the entire country. We just haven't had to focus on it until now. And now we've got to step up our game. And I can talk about the specifics of what we do, but that's kind of the focus from a broad brush standpoint.
Great. So, the way we usually like to do these, I like to do these conversations is let's let everyone get to know a little bit about you. So I've got a bunch of questions about your background, what you did, what brought you here. We'll come back to Startup America, and then we'll talk about what really is probably on the top of their minds, just what are the things that I need to do to be successful like other high-growth companies, and what are the things that you're seeing across them. So let's start off with the high school stuff. What got you interested in being an entrepreneur in high school and college, and what kind of stuff are you doing? Where are you from?
So I'm born and raised in Connecticut. Recently, about a year ago, moved down to Maryland into the DC metro area actually for this project because it was a good jumping off spot and strategically made a lot of sense. But grew up in Connecticut, went to school there, never lived anywhere else, married my college sweetheart. Pretty much the best decision I ever made. Everything else doesn't even matter, actually. And when I was in high school, there was this thing about making your own money that was really intriguing to me. I really liked the idea of getting paid. And when you're a high school student, you basically have two choices. One is to try to go get a job like bagging groceries or selling newspapers. None of that appealed to me because it looked too much like work, right? And so I sort of said, well, how could I try to find ways to make kind of more money on my own? And so I had been cutting my parents' grass. It was kind of a chore, but I would get paid, $5 to cut the grass. And I thought, well, I got a lawnmower. I said to my dad, can I borrow the lawnmower? So I went around the neighborhood and created my own kind of landscaping business. And I thought I'd done an amazing, remarkable thing. I was probably 13 or 14 years old. This was like, I was a genius. I was making, of course, I had no capital costs because I basically borrowed the lawnmower, right? The fuel somehow magically appeared, so that was pretty easy. So it was like an all-margin business for me, right? I went out and I cut the grass. Now, I thought I was really smart. So it was right before I went into high school, so I must have been where I went to high school. Ninth grade was the middle school went up ninth grade, and then high school started at 10th grade. So I get to 10th grade. I'm about, 3 months into school. I meet this guy. I'll never forget his name. His name is Jonathan. And we were talking about how we spent our summer. And I said, I did this great thing. I started this business. He said, yeah, I started this business too. And he went on to explain to me that not only had he started an actual landscaping business as a sophomore in high school, but he had bought his own equipment. He had, 8 or 10 people working for him. And he had made like $50,000 in the summer. Now I had made like $500 in the summer. And I thought I was a genius. And it was then that it really caught the bug. It switched for me from the idea of let's put some money in my pocket and sort of like work as little as possible to get it. Although cutting grass in the summertime in Connecticut is about the most miserable thing you could possibly do with your time. It's hot, it's sticky, it's dusty, it's ugh. But that first high school experience was like, wow, you could build an actual business around this. And what did that mean? And I started to spend time thinking about how that would work out. And by the time I was out of high school and right into college, I had started a computer consulting business. I was actually installing networks. For those of you in the room who remember the invention of Ethernet before the internet, before all that stuff, like small offices and particularly law offices, they literally would pull floppy disk. Who remembers what a floppy disk is? Okay, good. I'm not that old. Yeah, exactly. 5 1/4. The real floppy ones, not those big 10-inch ones, though. We didn't have those. So that was kind of the bug for me. We started this consulting business. I actually carried it on through college and then started a bunch of companies in college.
That's great. And then what would you say, what would you define as your first big professional success? Because you had a company before.
Overcoming
Priceline.
a potential business failure was probably my biggest success. The company we started in college, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Did you study computer science, or did you just kind of self-teach the technical side of things?
I started programming when I was about 12 years old, which is the age of my son down here. So anybody's looking for an internship, I can leave him here. I don't have to bring him back to the East Coast. I've been authorized. We have 4 kids, so we got spares. So I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I started writing software, went on and wrote a bunch of software all through high school and college. And then in college, we started this company. I actually started a company with a college professor. And at the time, and I don't know what it's like at UCLA, but a lot of colleges and universities are still this way, it's really hard for a professor and a student to join and create a business. Like Stanford does it pretty well, MIT does it pretty well, Carnegie Mellon does it pretty well, but there's only probably a dozen or so universities in the whole country.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so difficult?
I think that universities don't get, there's too much holding on and not enough letting go, would be the sort of the meta function, is that.
But there are all these tech transfer, right? Every university is now looking to commercialize their.
Yeah, the challenge is that they overlook the best raw material in the place, which are the students. Mm-hmm. So the students in most universities, especially undergrads, are treated as if they're essentially the cash cow that they're treated as, which is, well, we got to bring them in, we got to fill the seats, but we're not actually focused on figuring out how to deliver the greatest value to them. That's not all universities, but that's some. And so a lot of the tech transfer and stuff happens, frankly, in isolation, usually by some combination of the tech transfer office, which is supposed to be out finding potential partners to take things on. It's very different than an entrepreneurial experience. It's very different than a whole cloth development. You might be using technology. In fact, when we started the company at the University of Connecticut, my professor was an artificial intelligence expert.
What software were you writing? What was the software doing?
So we wrote software that taught pilots how to fly in the clouds using a personal computer. Any pilots in the room? Instrument pilots? So instrument training is where you fly only looking at the instruments, which is really well suited for a personal computer because you don't need to have the simulation of the flight experience. You just need an accurate simulation of really the instruments themselves. So we built a flight simulator, but the artificial intelligence was, we actually.
Who had the knowledge of was it your professor, the knowledge of the flight simulator? Who had the core knowledge to build?
So we had a team of flight instructors that we worked with that were kind of the domain experts. He was a pilot, really the co-founder of the company. And then I wrote a flight simulator, and we wrote a simulation of a flight instructor, which was all the artificial intelligence baked in.
Did you find, especially at that early age, being so entrepreneurial and doing something that, that's not like starting a pizza delivery business in college. That's pretty advanced stuff. Do you feel like it isolated you or separated you from your peers, or is it just something that you did?
I never thought that it did. From my standpoint, it's just who I was. It was no different than anything else. As an engineering major, you're already in a different group of people from a focus standpoint. And at the time, you had to actually go to a computer lab to really do anything substantial. We had PCs and stuff, but you really couldn't.
So what was that big challenge that you overcame?
So this was the big challenge. So created a flight simulator, built this fantastic product. You can actually still buy the product today. We released the first release in 1994. So a pretty long-standing product, solved a very particular problem. We built this amazing product. But I actually believed Kevin Costner in the movie Field of Dreams. Now, for those of you who've seen this movie, I would like you to repeat after me the main line in the movie. If you build it, they will come. Bullshit. Okay? Total lies. What did I know? I was 22, 23. It seemed like the right thing to do. We'll just build the most amazing product ever, and somehow the phone will magically ring. Not true. So we didn't really understand marketing. We didn't really understand advertising. We missized the market massively. We assumed that every pilot in America would want to get an instrument rating. Well, it turned out that like 5 to 10% of the pilots in America want to get an instrument rating. And even the wannabes weren't really committed to it, but they were good customers for ours. But it was still much, much smaller market. So I spent 2 years of my life really becoming a marketer, a salesperson, to actually sell the product. And that went from, we missed payroll. How many of you guys have been threatened to miss payroll? Anybody here? That's when you know you're a real entrepreneur, is when you don't know if you're going to make payroll next week. That's truly when you're facing that sort of a challenge. It's even more of an entrepreneur when you're not one not getting paid next week. And so that was the sort of the challenge we overcame. But what we did was I read every book on sales. I read every book on telemarketing. I read every book I could find on direct marketing. Remember, it was pre-internet time, so it wasn't like you could do a lot of research on this stuff. There weren't really clear models out there. We are way better off now, and I'll talk more about this. We have much more understanding about how to do a lot of the things that high growth businesses and scalable businesses than we knew 20, 30 years ago. Whether it's Steve Blank in customer development or Eric Reese around the world.
How did you capitalize the company?
It was all bootstrapped. I mean, we were begging, borrowing. The co-founders took out loans on the mortgages on their houses. So it was high risk when we had to figure out how to sell this stuff. We were selling $500 software, shrink-wrap software, kind of one at a time. Now, it's really great if you can sell about 1,000 of those a month. It's like you're rolling in dough, right? I mean, but it was hard to do that. We actually got it to that place. But it was essentially facing, ending this company versus getting it to be successful. And the trick was, which I know the words now, I didn't have any clue at the time, but we had to be very good at selling, but we also had to recognize that we weren't very good at selling. That was not our area of expertise. We were really, really good at product development. We were not going to be the best people at sales. The business wasn't really going to support, the economics weren't going to support the ability for us to really build a big marketing and sales channel. So we had to find a partner. And what ultimately happened with the business was we basically became great product developers, and we partnered with a major software distributor in the aviation space, which brought us a licensing fee reliably every month, which meant mortgages got paid and salaries got done. And the irony of it is about 2 weeks after we cut the deal, I realized that I had to leave. That kind of the next step for me was not going to be kind of building more product. I had gotten this bug that the magic of this marketing and sales thing was really the thing. Like that was the part that really was the exciting part for me from an entrepreneurial experience. It was not just building great product, but actually figuring out how to drive sales and growth and get to scale.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think a lot of engineers shy away from wanting to dive into learning about marketing and sales. So what was that process like for you? But do you think there was anything different about you that made you gravitate towards wanting to learn and use all that information, or was it just the necessity of your situation?
Desperate men do desperate things. So I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'd like to learn about this stuff. It came over time, but it really came out when you're really not sure if the business is going to fail.
What would you say is the most important things that you learned in those days about marketing and sales?
It's not about you as the product developer, everything else. It's about your customer and how you communicate about their needs, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. And that's true whether you're selling hand-to-hand at a conference, literally one product at a time, really understanding what are their goals and objectives, what are the customers really looking for, and being very, very clear about who that customer was. The mistake we made in that business was we thought our customer was everybody in the population of pilots. What we really needed to do is to figure out who were the people who were really going after this particular aptitude that they were seeking. So, if you're selling test prep software to people who are let's say going to grad school, right? That's not all undergrads who want to go to grad school. It's a particularly subset of graduates.
What did you find harder, being good at building product and the technical side of things, or being good at marketing and sales?
I think both are challenging in different ways. I think the product development piece in the pure building what's been specified is actually relatively straightforward, right? Because there's a known answer at the outcome, and you can sort of test to see whether that's true. I think that we're much better understanding about, or I am now, about using that same exact process, but recognizing that the key difference is the human behavior piece on the other end. Computers will behave largely rationally all the time. You can expect the same outcomes. Humans, not so much, right? There's a lot of variability in humans. And so understanding what really makes somebody tick. And I think the key marketing lesson for me, one of them was that what people say they want is often not what they really want. So you have to understand and really dig deep. It's one of the things I think Steve Blank has done a great job. For those you don't know, you can go to steveblank.com, or you should pick up his latest book, which is called The Startup Owner's Manual. But he talks about this process of customer development, getting large sample sizes of literally one-on-one, independent, in-depth interviews with who you think your prospects are, and really listening carefully, and doing it way before you start building your product. And I think that was one of the key things that had we done that when we built this product, I would have released a much simpler product much sooner. Because we ended up doing this, one of the big choices we made was we actually dumbed down the product radically and sold basically a $100 version of the product that allowed us to get into and then figure out who was really serious. So we could sell something cheap to a much wider audience, and then that gave us the mechanism to tease out the ones that wanted the upgrade. Right? So as a mechanism, but had we known, it would have been, people say they want to fly on instruments, but boy, when you ask them to drop down their credit card for $500, that's when really the rubber meets the road. We could have known that going into it and sort of figured out how to bifurcate even that market much more quickly.
Got it.
Without taking much time.
And then how did you end up getting involved with Priceline?
So I recognized that I wanted to learn more about this whole marketing thing, because I figured whatever I was going to do in my life, I wanted to go to scale. Everything was about getting big and getting big fast. That was sort of my passion. Part of the reason why I love working at Startup America is working with literally tens of thousands of high growth startups, because my adrenaline rush is all about the opportunity for growth and scale. It's high risk, it's fun, it's exciting. So I wanted to go work with somebody who understood this whole marketing game, because that's what created demand. So I met Jay Walker, who's if we have the founder of Priceline.com, it's Jay. He had started a high growth business, all marketing related. And so I had met him through a friend of mine's dad, actually, when I was in high school. And I was leaving to move to the West Coast after we had done this licensing agreement. I left, literally had found an apartment, had my new bride with me. We were moving out to the West Coast, and he came and said, why don't you come work with me instead? I was the fourth employee at something called Walker Digital, which is the intellectual property lab that we were inventing a lot of different things in and around the internet and other things. And one of the things that popped out was Priceline.
Got it. And also you had developed some of the patents that Priceline eventually ended up using. Were you the CTO there the whole time through?
Well, through about a year after we went public, I left, somewhere on that order of magnitude. When you are the founding team.
But from the start on, you were in that CTO slot.
We didn't really have a CTO slot. I was part of this founding team, basically, because we didn't even know what we were building at the time. But at the end of the day, I took that role on. We had a chief marketing officer.
How many employees were at the company when you left?
At Priceline?
Yeah.
Probably
hundreds, right?
500, 600 employees.
So talk about that process. What was that like because in your other business, it didn't sound like there were that many, four. Yeah. And you're how old now at Priceline when you start there? You're 23?
26.
26?
Well, Priceline didn't really start until I was 27, I guess.
Okay.
A whole year later.
So you're 27. The largest company you worked in is a company of 4 where you're basically all co-founders together. You're now in this thing that, probably after a period of time starts taking off a little bit more like a rocket ship. What was it like to grow the company that quickly and then have that many people in the company and have to manage all those people?
Challenging. One of the things that's great about being either young or new at something, and really being young and new is a great advantage, because you don't know what is hard and not hard, right? So I had no idea, and I pretty much spent my whole life having people come up to me and say, what were you thinking? And I go, I don't know, it seemed like a good idea. How bad could it be? So what, we got to hire 100 engineers in a quarter. That sounds reasonable, right? That's only like a little more than one a day if I hire on Saturdays and Sundays, right? And lots of companies go through those kinds of growth spurts. So I didn't know what we didn't know. Our founding team had some experience in a range of both working in larger companies and building out larger teams. But
what was the management philosophy you developed? If you had to distill your management philosophy down to 2 or 3 key points, what is your management philosophy?
Manage by deploying people with responsibility and authority, not task management. That was a really tough thing for me to figure out early on. Because when you're a lead engineer on a project, how many people here have engineering backgrounds, lead engineers, right? So you can live and die by essentially the ticketing system, right? You might have a project plan, but stuff comes in, it gets stacked in the queue, and you go attack it, you solve the problem, you check it back in, and you move on. So whether you have a small software team of 20 people or 15 people, you get into sort of a rhythm of how you project manage. That doesn't scale particularly well when you're trying to manage a much larger organization with lots of different disparate parts. And then managing with lots of peers. One of the things a lot of young managers, and this is true for for founders and co-founders is, it's one thing when you're all in the trenches together. It's a whole other thing when you start to have division of labor, and that was tough at Priceline because at first, I was pretty much the lead, if you want to call it an executive, but I had a small team of 10 people that we pretty much worked on everything. And then as the team got bigger, you sort of split up, and there was somebody who was really focused on marketing and sales for the first product was airlines, and then working on the next versions of the products and the next kinds of businesses. So the trick to me is aligning responsibility and authority and really deploying people against specific objectives that give them that responsibility and authority, and stand back and really give them the room to fall down. But if you've truly given them responsibility and the authority, and you've hired good people, they'll pick themselves up, they'll learn from it, and they'll execute on it. If you try to task manage every piece, you try to manage or over control things, it just blows up in your face. You can't get anything done.
So going with the philosophy that if you build it...
I didn't know that when I started.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's a retrospect thing.
Yeah. Well, you'd be a lot more ahead of the game if you did. What caused if you had to attribute Priceline's success to a couple small factors, what do you think really helped it break out?
We had a couple of advantages. One is the founding team, really with the exception of me, although actually including me in the sense of the startup that I had before, we'd all learned a lot. We all had a pretty good diversity of experience, and one of the core tenets that we had was we were going to build a great business. We didn't get caught up in any of the hype. We weren't in the middle of Silicon Valley, so we weren't competing with a lot of the talent. Mm-hmm. We were really going to build a great business, and it didn't matter what else was going on in the rest of the world. We were going to take advantage of this massively growing new market of getting that at the time everybody was getting online, and so we figured if we could ride that wave, that would be a strategic advantage to us.
How did you actually get? Because I think that you definitely were the first in any kind of hospitality that I remember seeing around naming your price. What were the deals that you had to strike with the airlines to be able to get the tickets for prices other than what they were listing them on their own websites at the time?
So it's interesting. One of the things you have to figure out as an entrepreneur and as a startup is who's actually your customer. So to answer that question, I'll just, as you guys are out there thinking about your businesses, really define who's your customer. And your customer is largely who's paying you. And it sounds like a trivial thing to dig into, but there are a lot of businesses out there that have users. They might have an audience. But at the end of the day, the customer is who's kind of cutting the checks. And it's taken a lot of businesses a long time to sort of figure that out. We were designing for the customer out of the gate. It was still challenging, but when we were working with airlines and hotels and others, we really focused on the primary challenge that community had, which is unsold inventory. Right? An empty airplane seat flies from, as I did today, Washington, D.C. to LA. It's going whether there's a person in that seat or not. So there's a price at which, and that's why we called it Priceline, there's a price at which it makes sense for you as a seller to sell that inventory because you can profit from it. In fact, it's almost all gross margin to put somebody on an airplane. It's like $20 in terms of if you have 70% of the seats filled, the incremental next one seat doesn't actually cost you that much, right, to get there. So that margin, but you have to design the product to deal with all their challenges, right? Which in the case of airlines or hotels and others is how do you make sure that the people who are willing to pay full freight continue to pay full freight, that they pay the full price? How do you make sure that you're not deteriorating their retail price as they don't need any help lowering the price? Any seller can lower their price. It's easy. And it's one of the challenges that the Groupons and Living Socials of the world are facing now is that, if you just go after discounting, at some point that catches up to you. And so you have to figure out how to create loyalty and other types of programs. So what we had to do is to navigate the world that the airlines and the hotels and the rental car companies are in, provide a product that we thought customers would like, consumers rather would like, and sort of find that mix. So it was a real challenge, but we had to work closely with them to have them be bought into the notion.
And part of the mythology is that William Shatner did it mostly for equity instead of cash comp, and because of that, years later just made a boatload of money. Is that actually true?
I don't know about the latter part because it would depend on how he managed his equity stake, but he was one of the first stars. Here we are in Hollywood. I'm not sure how William Shatner was a star in 1997 or 1998, but he was one of the first actors to kind of look
was,
at it
yeah.
and take an equity stake in a company.
I mean, I would really say that, I mean, right now in Los Angeles, that's probably one of the most popular things. It's a huge, I think LA is leading the charge among high growth online consumer web businesses to bring in well-known celebrities. You got folks like Ashton Kutcher and Lady Gaga that are actively trying to invest in startups. Justin Timberlake, Madonna. You've got companies here in our backyard, Beach Mint, that are lining up all these celebrity endorsers, Shoe Dazzle. And I really think it started with Priceline and William Shatner. I'm not kidding. I think that when the agencies heard about William Shatner making all this money with Priceline, they wanted to get in on it and they wanted to get their clients in on it. And I think in a lot of ways, Priceline pioneered the celebrity endorser for a consumer web product. I can't think of a major product before that successfully leveraged the celebrity endorser, can you?
Probably not in the tech or the infotech space, and definitely not in the internet era. A big factor that made him work was that we were buying, at one point I think we were the largest buyer of radio in America. And William Shatner's voice is very, very distinctive, right? So, hi, I'm William Shatner. You immediately hear, Captain Kirk, and you're kind of like, okay, now what does he want to tell me? So it was really effective. I mean, so you've probably seen the TV ads, but the radio was really what drove it because it was a really efficient way of getting the message out. And at the time, not everybody was online. So we actually had a philosophy at the time, which is important for those of you guys who might be developing a new market, is to really understand where the market is that you need to bring along. So there was like 35 million people on the internet at the time, or in the United States anyway. Very, very small. It's like probably at the time it might have been 15% of the people. So we actually had a philosophy about like, if you heard about this Priceline thing, you might ask a friend who had access to the internet to help you buy your airline tickets. Because we were thinking about it in those terms. And so by advertising on the radio, it drove traffic essentially to the web, which didn't really have much, even though a lot of our competitors were only advertising the web, which sort of had nobody.
How many rounds did you raise at Priceline?
That's a great question. But
you raised a lot of money.
Yeah, we raised a lot of money pre-IPO, but a lot of it came through going public. We were also in this crazy fast track environment. I mean, it was an anomaly in anomalies.
What would you say was the biggest challenge you faced at Priceline? Because it seemed like it was a pretty, hockey stick experience up.
Well, it was until the bubble burst, right? So 2000, you had major financial collapse in March of 2000. Then if you fast forward a year later, everybody's still in kind of recession mode. And then 18 months after that, 9/11 happened and essentially really destroyed the travel industry. I mean, grounded airplanes for 10 days. So those challenges for the business were really kind of core. In terms of the hypergrowth phase up through the IPO, it was really that. It's how do you build a business that scales as fast as we did? We went to $1 billion in sales in 24 months. So when you're looking at that kind of volume, it just is huge. And the difference between getting...
What was the $1 billion in sales, the full ticket price?
Yeah.
All right, so you kept the...
Yeah, but just remember, in an e-commerce play, you still got to get the credit card out of the wallet. You got to get...
Yes.
And our transaction ticket size, I think it was like 2.5 tickets on average. It's been a long time since I thought of these numbers. But you're talking about over $1,000, $1,500. So it's not like you're buying a book on Amazon. To drive that volume at that time was a big deal.
Do you still think of the business as your own when you use the product, when you see it advertised? Do you have that affinity and closeness to it?
Yeah, I have that affinity with every product or project I've worked on. The dead ones I don't see as often. I don't run into them frequently. The live ones, though, it's always nice to sort of see. And no matter what the project is, it's exciting. You always have some pride in the things that you spend your time and energy on. And I think that's true for anybody who's worked on any kind of project.
And then, so let's fast forward now to Startup America. Were you kind of tapped on the shoulder to ask to come do that? What was the process of bringing you on to be CEO? Because I remember, I think before you came on, they had assembled the whole main advisory board. It was, no, not at all? I stand corrected. So talk about that process.
So it's like any other startup environment. There was
Where did the idea originate?
It tacks back to 2000, I guess the beginning of 2010, where a couple of the folks actually in the White House were focused on, what do we do around entrepreneurship as it relates to the economy. And there wasn't a lot of activity going on there. There's a lot in small business, a lot in large enterprise. And actually, Thomas Friedman had a column that talked about Startup America. And the White House and the Kauffman Foundation had been talking about what could we do around entrepreneurship. The Kauffman Foundation is based in Kansas City. They do a ton of research on what it means. That 5-year statistic is all through almost a decade of research that Kauffman did. And so kind of fast forward a year later, Steve Case, no relationship to me, but co-founder of AOL, was tapped or asked to come basically co-found it with the Kauffman Foundation, so the Case Foundation. Steve is chair. So at the time that I joined, I was the third board member, where there was the Kauffman Foundation had someone, the Case Foundation, and then me. And we just built the whole thing from there. And it was really about, for us, focusing on everybody that's in this room, or what looks like about 75% of the folks in this room, high growth entrepreneurs, startups that were going to go to scale.
What appealed to you about doing nonprofit work instead of another for-profit venture? I mean, did you make enough money at Priceline that you're just like, hey, I'm good here, I just kind of want to have a different aim in life for a while?
I've just run a series of projects in my life. So whether it was the flight simulator company or actually working at Priceline, I've always thought of them as let's build something, let's go to scale with it, and kind of my role is in that phase of it. And I don't really distinguish between the work, right? So whether it's a social outcome that's the primary driver, or it's an economic outcome or a financial outcome, they all we operate the same way. The whole team we built at Startup America is all entrepreneurs or business leaders in their own right. And it's all about getting to scale. As an example, there doesn't exist a place in the United States that you can go and understand who is building a high growth company right now. So all the stuff that we have about high growth companies is retrospective, and it's usually 2.5 to 3 years old. We don't have a place where you can understand what's happening with entrepreneurs around the country. So that was one big thing, was how do we elevate that?
There are things like Crunchbase, right, that are aggregating database.
But they're sector specific. They're almost geographic specific.
They are absolutely sector specific.
And even what you've done at DocSo, you have a lot of different kinds of businesses in your mix, right? And you're servicing them in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we also don't have a directory, right? So that's not part of what we do at all.
Yeah. So we're trying to create a national community, really the national community of high growth startups, where you can get connected to basically solve the challenges that every business has. Access to customers, talent, building your team, and if you need it, investors. And those are the three biggest challenges that any startup has.
Let's talk. How does Startup America actually do those three things? How do you help people find talent? How do you help them find investors? What's the process that you go through? And then secondly, we'll talk about what are your metrics for success right now?
So generally, just to give you the sense, it's free to become a member of Startup America. If you're all starting a company, you should all join. You probably could do it right now while you're sitting there and not listening to me. It'd actually be a more useful thing for you to do, believe it or not. So the website is just s.co. We managed to talk to the .co internet people about giving us a single letter, and they did. So it was a lot easier than startupamericapartnership.org, which was a mouthful. But s.co/join, it's a 2-minute form, and you can sign up for this large community. So the biggest thing that we've done is focus on relationships. One of the biggest challenges that startups have, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, is focusing and building a community of people around you. Doing it in events like this is really important, that care about what you're doing and building. And so we've done that through both a national community, but more importantly, we have 26 startup regions, of which Startup California and Startup LA is one of the partners here tonight. So there's a Startup Montana, there's a Startup Colorado, there's a Startup Tennessee, all led by serial founders like yourself who are focused on creating community events like this and finding the connection points to help startups. We do it both virtually and physically at a national and a local level. So relationships is number one. Second big thing that you need is you need opportunities. If you're in an area where you don't have opportunities like this, or you don't have the right opportunities to maybe meet potential customers, to meet potential clients, it won't happen. And so in a place like LA, being able to get the opportunities to maybe, if you're building a business that might be targeting the entertainment industry, how do you make those connection points happen? We do that a large part through our regional effort, but But we also have programs that we work on nationally. So one of our sponsors is the New York Stock Exchange. We're doing a beta right now that will roll out either later this month or early next month, where any of the Startup America members, if you're a member now, you can sign up for the beta. And you can actually target any of the largest companies in the world to be able to essentially get an introduction to the right person at that company. So if you're selling into any of these large enterprises, or you're looking for strategic partners, a distribution partner, somebody with domain expertise, we now have something that's called corporate connections. So the whole idea is how do you get startups to be able to connect with, which helps you with your customers, oftentimes helps you with talent, helps you build relationships of domain expertise in your industry. I know when we were in a Priceline, that would have been super helpful. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out who at the airline was actually responsible.
When you're not measuring success by number of customers and revenue and satisfied customers, how are you defining your success? What are you saying? These are the goals. What are your goals for this year?
For Startup America?
Yeah.
Let me come back to that question. So 3 things: relationships, opportunities, and then the last is knowledge. Really, really important. There's a lot of ways and a lot of tools out there that can help you short circuit and route around a lot of common mistakes that startups make. The challenge is knowing where they are. So we've pulled together some of the, essentially all the authors I've mentioned: Steve Blank, Eric Ries of Lean Startup. We've brought them together. We've put a learning series together in a learning library where you can live talk to some of the top VCs in the country. You can talk to some of the top founders in the country and get live interactions with them kind of in a group format. And then if you can't make it in the live format, we do them 2 or 3 days a week. You can actually just listen to the library. We have pitch coaching every week where you can get a pitch coach, whether you're pitching to a customer, whether you're pitching for capital, whether you're just trying to figure out your storyline. All of that comes through. So the whole thing about Startup America, when you join, you're part of this whole national community, you're part of a local community, and you get access to the relationships, the opportunities, and the knowledge that you need to really overcome the core challenges, which are all about customers, talent, and what's the other one? Oh yeah, investors. So the way we measure ourselves is actually by the performance of the startups. So our key metric is how quickly can we build a highly dense national community. We have over 8,000 startups have already joined Startup America. We kind of opened our doors at the beginning of this year in a formal way. So we spent last year trying to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and building the partnerships. We've got, in the opportunities category, we've got $1.5 billion in-kind services from companies like Dell, Microsoft, Intuit, American Express, American Airlines, LinkedIn, Google, Facebook, all of which have ways to reduce costs or increase your customer traffic. And then the second order measurement is, do the companies that are in this room, are they growing? And can we track that growth? So when you sign up, we'll ask you, it could be 0 right now, what's your current revenue run rate? We keep that confidential, we don't share it, but we do aggregate it up and look at how are regions around the country growing. We have 26 different startup regions, so we're looking at each of those regions and saying, for the startups that are in that region, how are they growing and how are they performing? And are they taking advantage of the in-person resources, the network that's there? Is that network density growing? And so we're measuring ourselves around that success. Because ultimately, if we don't help any startups grow, we haven't accomplished much. So we're really focused on the growth and the health and well-being of the startups. And in fact, we have a picture we use from a management standpoint. The startups are at the middle. All of our regions are around it because they're sort of the warm hug that every startup needs, the experts that are in that field. And then we bring in our partners, all those corporate partners. We bring in the media. We've been working with a lot of media to understand this category of company, which is very different than the typical business publication might cover. A lot of the companies are invisible. How many of you have a sign on the side of your building that's 5 feet high that says that you're a startup? Right? None of you. It's one of the reasons why the politicians have a hard time. They don't walk down the street and see anything, so they don't understand. Right? It's very visceral, tactile reality. So the big opportunity here is for us to figure out how to do that. And so that's how we measure ourselves. Number of startups that we're serving, and then how are those startups performing in their individual businesses.
How many folks do you have working full-time, and how many volunteers do you have now?
We have about a dozen on our core team, and then there's about 250 formal startup champions. So we have a couple of folks from Startup LA. You want to stand up? Anybody else here from Startup LA or Startup California? So why don't you stand up? You wave at the audience. Okay, these people are supposed to help you. So there you go. They get paid an enormous salary of nothing. But they're all serial entrepreneurs and like yourself, Jason. So it's all about those people. And we get that group together about once every 3 or 4 months.
Do you have to worry about fundraising, or is Kaufman just going to fund this indefinitely? I mean, is part of the goal that you're going to prove out how much of a difference you can make and then go out to a larger community to raise more money for the Startup America mission?
So we actually have 8 total sponsors. We have 2 foundations and we have 6 corporate sponsors.
How much total does that come to?
We report through the Kaufman Foundation, so it supports our team. Let's put it that way. It's a little complicated the way the rules work.
But it supports 13 full-time people.
Yeah, we have a full team of people. We do a lot of travel. It supports our ability to go to
your
events.
salary of $25 million a year, right? Like Jeremy Lin's salary that we're talking about here? Linsanity?
Well, that's why I have these sneakers on. It helps me jump higher, these Chuck Taylors. No, we have a small team that's pulled together, and it's been a startup for startups. So we're really focused on how do we get to that level of growth ourselves. And our real emphasis is on how can we empower both the regional champions around the country to really help grow these communities.
To be able to bring in more funds, or are those the partners that really just there you want to keep using to fund the mission of what you're doing?
Our primary objective is to get the startup communities that we're working in to be much more cohesive, and really that's the sustainable engine for the long haul. So we looked at this as a 3-year project, which we're about halfway through right now, and a jump start.
What's your personal goal? When at some point you'll be doing something else. When you look back on the legacy of what you did, if there's one thing that's the most important thing you said, you can look back and say, in my tenure heading up Startup America, as the first CEO there, we accomplished X. What is that thing for you? Is it being able to measure the fact that you help spur and create more high-growth startups? Is it being able to look at the number of jobs you created? Is it?
I think the highest order piece is it's a cultural shift to recognizing this category of company as the athletes, the heroes, the drivers of our economy, and that we as a culture are celebrating that and investing time and energy in it. And that comes through, this won't be a direct result of Startup America, but I think if we do a good job sort of demonstrating what's possible when you focus on this category of company and we build a large national community around it, it'll be a lot easier for young people in elementary school or for people who might work in a larger company to step out and join and creating the next big businesses that are out there.
Besides technology, what else are you putting in? What are you seeing right now as high growth industries where you're seeing a lot of companies from that industry pop up?
So at Startup America, we don't focus on any one sector. So we actually divide the world into about 40 different sectors. Roughly 30% of the companies that are part of Startup America are self-defined technology or infotech companies. The rest are across the board: retail, energy, education, healthcare, life sciences, healthcare IT.
But is technology the single largest concentration?
Yeah, that's the single largest concentration. And the thread, which makes sense, we're in the information age, so almost every business is leveraging information technology of some kind as either a key differentiator or a core strategy to differentiate themselves when they build their business.
And then what percent of those 8,000 businesses haven't taken in outside funding, really got to that high growth scale on their cash flows or by bootstrapping?
Interesting. So it turns out that 15% of high growth companies take any kind of, let's call it VC, formal external capital. So I'll rule out angels unless they're formal, which they usually are. If they're super angels, it's a more formal round. But 85% of high growth companies never take any outside capital. So that's pretty much holds true for our community as well. And while outside capital is a metric, it's really about what kind of fuel do you need to grow your business. And
what are you defining as high growth? You asked everybody here who's running a company 5 people and under, but if in
5 years and under. It's really about the age
under
of the company, not even the size.
Got it. So what puts a category in a high growth for you? What do you know? How will somebody know if their business is a high growth business as you're defining it?
So I guess there's 2 factors. One is at the time that you're creating the business, is your ambition scale? Are you trying to be a national or a global company? Are you trying to go to some level of sort of market dominance in what it is that you're building, right? So that's the first order is the ambition. And then in terms of the measurables, we sort of look at the floor at about 20%, 25% growth year over year. So that's doubling your business every year, every 4 years. So that's kind of the floor of what we're looking at. Most of the companies that we're looking at are, especially in the first 2, 3, 4 years, they might be 100, 200, 300% growth. Some of them are growing 25% a month, month on month, right? So it's really about that trajectory of growth in the core part of the business.
So as far as let's talk about the tech space right now. It's you've been through a lot of these cycles. You've seen a lot of different things. A bubble, valuation. Where do you think we're at as far? It seems like we've swung to the other side of the normalized middle part of the pendulum, where we're having really high valuations and really competitive times again. What are you seeing in the next 2 years? Do you think that we're going to have a correction in terms of these private financings? Because it doesn't seem like public market investors are valuing companies the same way private market investors are right now.
So first off, from an entrepreneur's perspective, from a startup perspective, pay no attention to any of that stuff. Seriously, just go build a great company. Build a great company. If you build a great company, it sorts itself out. Build a shitty company, you have all kinds of problems. Just avoid that part. It's much easier. So build a great company is really the most important thing. In terms of where valuations go, it looks like a lot of science when you look at it from the outside, but when you look at it on the inside from a VC perspective, there's not so much science to it, right? And there's all kinds of reasons why valuations go the way that they go. And so you've got to...
Do you do angel investing?
I do some direct investing, and it's sort of not in a formal way. I've suspended all of that for this project because it's just too messy. But I think that the key thing is build a great company. I think the public markets value things very differently for a variety of reasons that have nothing to do mostly with the core business itself. I think that the VCs have lots of reasons why they make the investments that they make and why they're triggering those kinds of investments.
When you were investing, what were you looking? What characteristics were you looking for? Was it what incentivized you to say, yeah, I want to invest and back your business?
Talent, and talent. It comes right down to the quality of the team. Because a great quality team will pivot and make adjustments and is capable of dealing with what the market throws at it and can be capable of doing that. That's not to say that you can have a horrible idea but really when you look at it, it's about the quality of the people that are leading it. Doesn't mean you're always right, but one of the things that make founders so powerful to our economy is that we're almost incapable of not founding something after we found something, right? So if we start something, whether it win or lose, we're just going to do it again. And that's the part that is really a key driver when we talk to particularly leadership, like in government, you look at state leadership. It's the only place that you can put investments where you're guaranteed to have the people that are driving it. They're going to continue to build stuff, and if they're encouraged to be in, whether it's Michigan or it's in Colorado or it's in Tennessee, they'll stay there and build their businesses and grow them. And that makes, from a state level, it's not a zero-sum game. And the beauty of it is that Michigan and Wisconsin can both build awesome startup economies, and they don't have to compete with each other, right? And so that's what we're trying to drive at a meta level. And to focus on that piece of it, in all those places, all about talent and team, and are you surrounded by the right kind of people? And team, I define not only people working on the business, but all the people around the business, which is a key. If I have one takeaway for you people in the audience, and I'll give you a homework assignment with it, actually a now assignment with it. So join Startup America, did I mention that? Okay, join Startup America. Number 2 is spend time on relationship development around your business. Don't assume it's going to happen auto-magically. And don't wait until you suddenly need 3 connections to help you find your first reference customer or find your first employee or find your first investor. By then it's too late. You've already lost the opportunity to really create a rich and robust network around you. And that brings me to my now assignment, or at the end here. Please go meet 3 people you don't know before you leave tonight. Just 3 people you don't know, and I don't count. And he doesn't count either, okay? Because it's not about us as much as we're wonderful human beings, but it's really about the network that you build around you that's going to be there sustainable over a long period of time.
Great.
Sorry.
So why don't I try to help incentivize the sign-up process? How many of you, again, fit into the category of qualifying to sign up for Startup America and haven't already. So let's go over the criteria. A company 5 years and younger.
5 years and younger.
Keep your hands up for a second.
Whether you have revenue, you don't have to have revenue. You can be in product development, or we call them startups, ramp-ups, and speed-ups. You have a product and market where you're going to scale, or you can be a speed-up. You could be a $20 million company. In certain sectors, we'll take companies that are older than 5 years old, like life sciences, some energy-type companies. So if you're older than 5 years old, there's still an opportunity for you, but you have to be in market.
So we're going to make a deal tonight. If in the next 24 hours you sign up for Startup America and you tweet out, hey, at Jason Azar, at Startup America, I just signed up, we're going to sign you up for DocStock for a year for free. Does that sound like a good deal?
There you go.
All right, we've got to see in the next 24 hours. I'm taking you on your word from this. So we better see the registrations come in, or else you're going to have the CIA on the case.
I don't know about that.
But hey, at Jason Azar, at Startup America, I just signed up, and we will have somebody from the DocStock office follow up and make sure that you get our product for a year for free.
Awesome. That's a great choice. So do we have some time for some questions from folks?
Yeah, we're going to open it up. We open up just in a little bit more. Why don't we take you and I just go over a couple things, and we'll go out to everybody. What's it like working with does the government get it? I mean, because they're not officially part of it, but you said
Wait a second. That's like a rhetorical question, right?
Well, I guess I have to ask it differently. What do they get and what don't they get? Because you said that it came out of the administration and the Kauffman Foundation, and so where are they really supportive, and what's the extent really of the relationship other than just you keep doing what you're doing and we'll recognize you when we want to get some good publicity for ourselves?
It's much deeper than that. I mean, to the credit, and actually there's a bunch of people in Congress and a number of people in the administration that really do appreciate and understand the value and the importance of high growth entrepreneurship. That hasn't always been the case, and part of our job is to make sure it stays to be the case, that it's a big part of why we want a national community, is that we want to make sure it's visible so that everybody sees the power and the importance of it. The startups right now, for example, that are part of Startup America have a collective revenue run rate of about $4 billion and represent a little more than 50,000 full-time employees. If you scale that up, where we'd like to get to is around 100,000, that's a pretty big industry sector, if you were. And the challenge is that we don't look that way to anybody. So we look like the 3 or 4 people, kind of sort of grinding it out, who might not be having, when we put our tax returns in, we're not a lot to show for it from a revenue standpoint yet. So I think that the political class and the leadership is getting it much more acutely so in the States. It's one of the reasons why we're focusing on the startup economy, because it's very visceral. It's much more tangible to that community. So there is real leadership there, really on both sides. The Jobs Act got signed into law in April, which was some major revisions to how capital formation can be done around startups at the very, very early stages with crowdfunding, all the way through to creating an IPO on-ramp, which is the first time since Sarbanes-Oxley got put into place, which is a regulatory framework for companies, publicly traded companies, where you can actually waive Sarbanes-Oxley if you're a company under, I think, $700 billion market cap when you go public. So it opens up the public markets for exits. For those companies that do take outside financing, that's a big deal, because we have a lot of companies now that are being acquired, and they're being acquired prematurely because there's investor pressure for them to be able to basically harvest their investment, and that pressure comes from the limited partners that invest in there. So there's a bunch of changes there that are happening in Washington. It's one of the few pieces of legislation in the last year that actually got passed into law and signed into law, where a Republican actually largely sponsored the bill in Eric Cantor. So it's a big deal. There's some big opportunities there.
Who are because there's an amazing board on Startup America: Reid Hoffman, Magic Johnson. I mean, the list goes on and on. Who are the 1 or 2 business leaders that you look up to the most, and what is it about them that stand out to you?
Inside our board or outside our board or anywhere?
Anyway, in fact, make it outside the board so you don't feel compelled to
pick.
Yeah.
I love them all equally?
Yeah.
I only brought one of my 4 kids with me here. So what does that say? You're a lucky dog. So when I look at it, from a business leader standpoint, my lens is largely through real entrepreneurs that are actually building companies. There's a whole different class of people who manage large enterprises, and I have a deep respect for those
what
folks.
entrepreneurs do you look up to the most?
So you brought up
Reid Hoffman's an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, you brought up. I think Reid right now in America, I think he is one of the most impressive entrepreneurs.
And for those who don't know, Reid Hoffman's the founder of LinkedIn.
And was one of the co-founders of PayPal. What separates Reid out, and this was true actually for Jay Walker as well, who is a mentor of mine. I admire him deeply.
He's going to come do this with us, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. He's going to talk about TED-Med and some of the stuff he's doing there? You don't know. Good. Well, you can grill him more in Priceline. Both Jay and Reid and a few others.
Oh, no, Reid's coming, not Jay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, take them both. We'll call Jay too. The understanding of what I describe and what others have described as the business architecture, the actual design of the business, not just the model, but the whole kind of ecosystem around the business. Reid really understands that, and Jay and others have understood. Steve Jobs understood that it's not just either a feature or a product or a customer. It's the whole package of what's going on in the business. Everything from how it will operate today and how it will operate at scale, and the path to that place from an internal standpoint to externally. What are the market forces that are going to be shaped? How do you truly create a market? What does it mean to have market validation? And one of the things that made LinkedIn work was that it wasn't the first social network that was there. It was one in a set. There were other people validating the market around them, and Reid understood there was a platform here. And that's a big difference. I think, spacing out now, Mark, Salesforce.com, Benioff. Mark Benioff is another one who understood that there was a platform here. It wasn't just a product or a service. And while people look at Salesforce as one of the first cloud computing, that's not really what in my view, sort of shaped it. It was the understanding that they could create a community around that, and then they could open that community up to other innovators. And that was really game-changing. It was a platform. It wasn't just delivering Salesforce automation services. It was actually a platform creation.
Well, I think it's a good pick. Reid's probably in my top 3 of entrepreneurs I look up to and respect. So.
Now, he's a good guy. But again, Mark Benioff is an example of that. Really understood the platform piece and how to build that.
Okay, great. So why don't we take this opportunity to open up some Q&A. We got a mic right up there at front here. We'll take them in the order that they're asked. I reserve the right, like I always do. Just walk up to the mic and ask questions in that order. I reserve the right, like I always do, where if it's a dumb question, I'm going to poke fun of you, and then we'll go to the next person. So use your time judiciously. And depending upon the number of questions, maybe what we'll save time for a little bit later, too, is 2 or 3 pitches so that you can have the master here give you feedback on your pitch. If you are going to pitch your business, which we'll get around to later, the one thing I'll keep in mind is you're going to have 30 seconds or less, and then we're going to cut you off right there. So with that, when you come up, your name, your company, and then jump into your question.
How you doing? Big fan of you. My name is Hugh John, and my company is SCS, Smart Economic Solutions. And what we do is necessarily helps businesses in the startup and in the middle class get funding. So my question to you is, you mentioned about crowdfunding. That's something I'm actually getting into. I worked for the banking industry for 7-8 years, and one of the challenges working inside of where most of the naysayers are saying about banks is that we want to give lending, but a lot of people don't know the new rules. So how can crowdfunding apply to everyone here, including myself?
So
what is crowdfunding?
What is crowdfunding?
You can tell them.
Okay. So thank you for the question. So crowdfunding, broadly speaking, is a kind of a class of, in the current state, where you as an individual or as a company can go out to a large community and typically raise small amounts of capital from a lot of different people. And what's really made it take off is essentially our digital social network now allows us to communicate and broadcast broadly our needs and intentions to a much wider audience of people. The current instance of most crowdfunding is based on some kind of a product, because there isn't up until the Jobs Act gets passed and the SEC is done, which will happen first quarter next year, you can't actually issue equity. So nobody in this room can actually raise equity funding today through what is true crowdfunding. There are sites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, AngelList is another category, where AngelList is really a referral network. They don't actually do the funding. In the case of Indiegogo, for example, you can go out there and say, I'm trying to raise $250,000. I need to prototype something, and everybody who commits to give money to it, you can set a bar, like anybody who gives more than $200.
Well, we actually have an amazing example here in Southern California. A Chance from Crowdfunder. We stand up for a second. So we have.
There you go.
I didn't ask for a round of applause for him. I just asked him to stand up. No, Chance is a good friend of ours. He's been to a lot of our events, and he's launched one of the I think the better known already crowdfunding platforms called Crowdfunder. Crowdfunder.com. They just launched, got started, gained a lot of traction. They did a huge event here in LA for about 300 people just last week.
Great.
So if you've got any questions about crowdfunding, or if your business would be a good fit for crowdfunding a platform, you can go find Chance in the back over there.
And I don't know, are you going to do equity financing?
That's primarily what we're focused on. We also see a need in early stage companies that haven't yet built the right structure or real immediate investment to raise funding for their
Got it.
Chance, have you signed up for Startup America yet?
So that's the basis of crowdfunding, and so it's a new tool that's going to be a really powerful resource for a lot of young companies to be able to raise that first big round of capital. I think you raise up to about $1 million through the current legislation. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, my name's Kathy McQuiggan. I'm a CPA and an Intuit QuickBooks Pro advisor, so I hear of Startup America because I'm in partnership with you on my website. But I noticed when I went to sign up just now, I currently work as a solopreneur, and it requires 2 founders. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, because I'm sure I'm not the only solopreneur in the room.
So we focused on as I mentioned, high growth companies. So with a focus on companies that are poised and committed to getting to scale. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways that we're trying to kind of focus is it's unlikely, though not impossible, mm-hmm. but it's unlikely that a single person on their own is going to drive a business to scale. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen, mm-hmm. but we use that as basically a gating filter to say, look, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful at scaling business unless you have somebody along for the ride. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that they have to be an employee of yours. Mm-hmm. They can be a co-founder of it. They can be somebody working with you on the product. They could be an advisor of yours. But they have to be committed to growth. That's the part that's really, really the important part. Okay. Somebody how many people, but we use that as a litmus, because it's not our intention to be a service provider that's helping individual consultants, for example, who that's their primary objective is to be income generating. It's really about a wealth generation function.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
That's what we focus on. Yeah,
okay,
no
great,
problem.
thanks.
And thank you for your help.
Hi, Scott and Jason. My name is Israel Cerna. I'm with the Small Business Development Center. We're one of the 3 technical assistant programs at the SBA funds. You touched on a really good subject earlier about mentorship. As an organization that offers one-on-one consulting, can you touch a little bit more about the mentorship that was influential in your career, anybody in particular, and any tips you have for small business owners who don't have a mentor and how they can seek one?
Sure. So I was blessed with a whole range of people throughout my life, many of whom I'm fortunate enough to continue to have long relationships with. And I would say 50% of that in my case was probably luck, if I look at it in retrospect, because I wasn't intentional about creating the relationships. I was, I guess, kind of gifted enough to understand that these relationships would be important to me, and so I built them over a long period of time. So I mentioned the way that I got involved with Priceline was actually my high school buddy's dad was working with Jay, and he introduced me to him. And I had spent a lot of time, not just with the buddy, but with his father, understanding his business, understanding what he was doing, understanding his career, because I was interested. So for those of you who are looking for mentors, you can't actually look for mentors. So what you need to do is to go create a set of relationships around you that are interested in your business. And mentors will raise their hands because they'll express interest. You'll know you have a mentor when they call you up to ask how it's going, not when you call them up and ask for their advice. That's the kind of person that you want to select to be part of it. But you've got to, it's like a sales function, right? You've got to go out and meet literally hundreds of people and get them, try to get them all excited about what you're doing, because you'll learn a lot through that process as well. That's sort of part of the sales and marketing piece. but you'll also find people that gravitate towards what you're doing, and from that inner circle, you'll be able to select those that are truly deeply interested in your success. You want to make sure that they have something to offer and that they can deliver real value. And you should also avoid having a mentor. You really want really sort of an advisory group, and your job as the CEO or as the founder is to take the information that you have and synthesize it down and make decisions based on the information. If you think that you're going to find somebody that's going to tell you what to do, you've already lost. Right? You need to have somebody that's in that advisory piece, but you've got to build that network around you and be always building it. We spend a lot of time as founders, I made this mistake I mentioned earlier, in product development. If we're really pushing hard, we'll talk about customers, but we're really bad for the most part, and this is what I'm seeing around the country anyway, at the networking piece, that network development, the creation and the cultivation. So a lot of people will show up at an event like this. They might meet one or two people, but the mission ought to be to meet as many people as you can and build a strong network of people who care about what you're doing, and then reciprocate, right? Find other people that are doing interesting things that you think you could be helpful to them on, because that payback loop is really, really powerful.
Thank you.
I think one of the most interesting points you made, because a lot of people ask, how do I find mentors, how do I court them? I think the point that you made that you'll know when you have a mentor, not because you need to ask somebody, but because they're calling you to ask how you're doing. If you surround yourself with the right people, I think that's a great piece of advice and something that hasn't been pulled out one of our ventures. I think it's very true. Because I'll even find myself, there's certain entrepreneurs I gravitate to, and I'll check in with them. I'll say, hey, what's going on with your business? And anything I can do to help out, and I'm just naturally interested in what they're doing, and I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and it's much about the talent. I come back to the talent from an investor. Mentors are investing their time, not their money. And in many ways, time is way more valuable. Turns out that it's the one resource that none of us have an infinite supply of. It's going to go away. There's only so many trips.
You can't make more of it.
Yeah, there's only so many trips around the sun, and the Earth ain't rotating any faster or slower. So you got to really manage that time. And so if people are giving you of that time, be really respectful of it, but also invest your own time in other people. You have a question?
Hi, my name is James Hines. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm shameless plug for, I actually run a meetup in Northern California called Co-working for Education. And we're actually hosting a startup ed tech summit series in October at a place called Digital Hollywood, which will be at the Ritz-Carlton this October. I'm asking Scott if you would participate, if I could reach out to you in this opportunity to really engage attendees to learn more about entrepreneurship, high growth opportunity, and particularly how entertainment industry should be a little bit more together with identifying what education brings to the place. And I did ask Jason earlier, he said yes at his other event 2 months ago. Hopefully he remembers. I'll bug him anyway again.
Well, I can't speak for you, but you can talk to my manager down here and give him a card, and then the real boss is back in Washington, D.C. So just send me a note if the schedule works. I'm happy to take a look at it.
Not a problem.
And if not me, we can probably have somebody else that may be out there to help.
Awesome. And then one last one to everybody in the room. It's a very big ticket item, but if you email me at the coworkingforeducation.com, we have a student and reduced rates.
Cool. Awesome.
Hi, my name is Wilton Lamb. I work for a small CPA firm over in Calabasas, Asner Financial. First, I want to thank you both for coming out and making an evening. It's been a wonderful presentation.
I had to come out. It was my event, in all fairness. But Scott, you can thank him.
Perfectly fair. One of the things you really drilled on was the importance of marketing and certainly reaching out in sales and connecting with your customers. Now, one of the questions I've always had was, why Shatner? I mean, he seems like a great guy, right? But I mean, was there a certain set of qualities looking for? I mean, the reason why this is important because he's the face of Priceline. I mean, you don't just choose a spoke code out of anywhere. I'm sure how was that process done? How did you determine he was the right fit? Are you privy to say why you chose him?
I mean, travel, Captain Kirk, the most distinctive voice. This was perfect. You couldn't find anybody better to do your commercials.
Well, a big part of it was built around both his distinctive. We needed somebody iconic that was going to work both on the radio and truth be told, we were a startup, so we were looking for being very opportunistic with the relationships that we had and the ability to be as effective as possible. But we put a lot of thought into it, and anytime you're dealing with a celebrity of any type, it's a high risk proposition on a whole different set of levels, right? They're they're highly scrutinized. So they're very, very visible, which is why you want them as a strategic partner, but they're highly, highly visible. So, all it takes is for somehow to either have the illusion of someone tripping up or actually have them trip up. And then it can be really damaging to your brand. So no matter who it is, it's a high risk proposition. But a big part of William Shatner was he was an iconic actor. He would work really well in multiple media, but in particular, he had a very, very distinctive voice on the radio. And since our strategy was to use radio as a principal advertising vehicle, those were sort of the key attributes that made him a success.
I'm just surprised you could get the commercials done with all of this pauses. It's like, use Priceline.
Well,
today.
I mean, that's part of who he is, though, right?
Yeah.
So it was about leveraging that part, and he's very self-effacing. He's very genuine. He's what you see is who he is, which makes him a great person to work with.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Hi, guys. My name's Robert Jadon. I'm the director of an accelerator here on campus. We're called Startup UCLA. And we actually have 9 companies we're hosting here on campus this summer, giving them resources, mentorship, weekly talks. And we have a bunch of them in the audience here. And I'm wondering what the best way is to get involved with the Startup America partnership and how you guys are working with universities.
So we work, the primary set of relationships we have around universities comes through our work with the regional champions. We do have,
I imagine that there's some, the way you say it, it's like some gladiator like tournament regional champion and that they bested in a...
Don't mess with those people. I'm telling you, they're like crazy maniac entrepreneurs,
amazing.
right? Takes one to know one. So we work a lot of it regionally because most universities, they're place-based things, right? But we do have an affiliate program with accelerators that we can talk about that's a little bit more national, where we'll do things like we'll promote, if you're doing events or you're promoting a particular class or you're trying to recruit people. Are you only student entrepreneurs right now?
Yeah, we're students and recent alumni from
So
UCLA.
one of the most valuable things you can do, so I'm going to turn this around to you, is what you're doing, which is connecting the students with the broader startup community. Because one of the big challenges you see on campuses is it's very isolating to be, you're sort of all the students, everybody talking to each, as opposed to going out and understanding that there's, I don't know, another 200 entrepreneurs here in the room, and how do you bring those communities together? So anything you're doing around bringing mentors in and others to create that vibe, but also getting the students out and working with or working in startups is really key. And I'm happy to talk to you more about it.
He's already got the name, Startup UCLA. I mean, it's
let's
all
do
there.
it.
It's ready to go.
Yeah, and obviously talk to Carrie and others because they're working on organizing a lot of the community around.
And Robert's been a pretty active angel investor in our community as well, too, investing in a lot of neat companies out here.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Amador, and I'm the founder of EventFinds.com, the first all-event deals website to hit the industry. And I feel like our businesses are very similar with Priceline because I was in the event industry and both a bride. And so I found that there were a lot of times as a vendor I had unbooked dates, just like you were saying. I have my business, but I was unbooked. There was no place to mass market these deals, and especially venues. They have space. They have certain dates they're unbooked, and there's no place to mass market this to anyone. So I created this website, and we're up and running. It's doing really well. But I do have some questions for you. With Priceline, did you guys have like exclusive contracts? Because we're kind of thinking of possibly trying to go that route, but I'm still not sure. And then my second question is, we also do need to find a developer that will come on board with our team and possibly grow with us and maybe take a stake of ownership. Instead of, we're outsourcing. So we're running into these two little issues right now where we're trying to figure out what the best way to further grow this business will be.
Well, I'll answer the second one. For the developers, you should talk to everybody here in the audience, unless you've got a back pocket of developers, in which case you can start a recruiting business, or talk to Cybercoders. That's one of our sponsors, and they'll help you out there. And then to the contracts question.
I was going to say use Cybercoders or anybody else who's a recruiter in the room. Exclusivity is both a seductive thing and sort of a dangerous thing. So you really got to make sure that you understand by going down a route of exclusivity what the costs of doing that are for the long-term value of the business. And once you go down that path, it's very hard to go back. It's much easier to go into it with sort of an open network and an open platform and then provide potentially preference to certain partners, right? So it may not be exclusivity in the fullest form, but some level of preference or weighting towards them under certain conditions. But it's a real challenge to do exclusivity because once you're down that path, you essentially set the game up to isolate everybody else.
Right. Thank you so much. Appreciate
bet.
it.
All right, I think we've got time for about 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm James Adams, co-founder of AirPay, the social wallet. Scott, thanks so much for coming tonight. I just had a question about Startup America. You mentioned one of the 3 things that Startup America does for its startups is to help connect them with customers. And I'm wondering if you could just maybe provide some more specifics about how Startup America does that.
So 2 levels. So at the retail level, we work with a bunch of our corporate partners. So 2 come to mind, for example, Google and LinkedIn, both who have special deals and training and knowledge that can help you traverse and leverage their platforms to acquire customers. So it's more consumer-oriented in the case of Google and then more probably B2B-oriented in the case of LinkedIn. And so we have a whole set of both knowledge engines as well as specific offers that can help you reduce costs and leverage those networks. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I mentioned our partnership with the New York Stock Exchange. We have something called Corporate Connections. So if you're selling into large enterprises, we have a mechanism now for you to put a very specific profile and almost a proposal together to go out to these large companies. So one of the challenges with large companies is that they don't have visibility on what are the solutions out there that maybe in some cases to problems they're not even totally sure they have, but you as an entrepreneur have innovated around in a way that could either massively reduce their costs or increase the efficiencies of their operations. So that corporate connections piece is another example of a way to get access to those customers. And then there's a lot of regional events like this one and others where there are a wide range of kind of mixers to pull people together to create those opportunities. And then we do things at events like South by Southwest and the Consumer Electronics Show and the Inc. 500-5000, where we literally do office hours where we'll bring executives and startups together, which is a much more hands-on, kind of hand-to-hand combat thing. We have time for one more?
We do. Yeah, let's take one more question.
Hello, Scott. Sorry about the botched joke over there earlier, but my name is Ryan Trouton. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Oregon. I got my bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship. And actually, this is a slightly political question, just a little bit though. President Obama was recently just quoted while talking to a group of entrepreneurs, essentially saying that as awesome entrepreneurs are to our economy, the federal government does provide the infrastructure, I guess, that allows them to succeed. And I do agree with that point, but I'm just curious to hear a take from a man like yourself. What role do you think the federal government should play in, entrepreneurship? And do you think that Startup America might be the bridge to help bridge the 2, I suppose?
So I'll break my answer into 2 pieces. So first off, as I said earlier, as a country, we've really been built by entrepreneurs, and part of the ethos and the culture has been about supporting the notion of creating new things, starting from scratch, building something that other people haven't seen before, didn't see, and really being creative and having a platform, if you will, in the government that can support those activities. So an example of that, we have a pretty strong tolerance for failure as a country. We'll tolerate things not going well, and if you start a company, chances are if you have to shut the business down, people will see that largely as you learning something as opposed to, oh my God, this person should never get a job again, they should do anything else. And if you back that up into some of the functions that our legal system supports, things like bankruptcy are a structured way of having another crack at it, right? So there's a lot of things about enforcing the rules and making it sort of our society functional from a startup perspective that, in general, it's not really a political question, it's just sort of how our economy has grown up and what are the rules enforcement. That said, most startups, when you look at and when we do polling and we talk to a lot of the community, positives or negatives of the federal government are pretty low on the list of things that are the challenges. And I mentioned the three. It's customers, it's team and talent, and it's access to capital. There are some of the rules and things that access to capital. There's some things around hiring, like the immigration law, that's a challenge for people to bring, where immigrant co-founders and founders are unable to stay in the country. But for the large part, it's about building great businesses. And so, the more that we can, make the rules friendly for the game to be played effectively, the more competitive we can be. But it's much more about a cultural drive than anything else.
Okay. Why don't we try to power through if you can ask the questions very quickly?
Two more on the stairs, that's great.
My name is Jim Newsom. I'm the executive producer of the Urban Tech Fair. We're a 10-city tour promoting access, education, and commerce in the urban community. I'm here tonight as a representative of the California Broadband Consortium, which is promoting broadband adoption here in Southern California to the unserved and undecided. Now, relative to some of the issues that you've been talking about tonight as startup entrepreneurship, how do you touch that undecided or that intentionally ignorant person that is sitting back saying, well, I don't want to mess with that, or I just want to play music, I don't want to know about the business, or I'm just an artist, let the bookkeeper do that. How do we address and engage our urban community, and despite some of the innovation, Silicon Valley spirit that's going on across the nation right now, in your opinion?
So that's a great question. So one of the things I learned in a startup world, and this is good advice for everybody here, is focus, 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 and don't try to be everything to everybody. So we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're really focused on in-market companies that are building their businesses right now. So if you're actively building a business right now, we're targeting you. I believe one of the side effects, and it's not an intentional outcome that we're measuring or trying to manage to, but one of the side effects of what we're doing is by highlighting and celebrating successful entrepreneurship all across the country, urban, rural, global companies, local companies that are focused on scale, that we can inspire other people who might be on the fence to want to participate in the startup economy. So, but that's really a second order effect. We're really, as a startup for startups, focused on this category of company that's already in market.
Thank you.
You bet.
No pressure on you. Just the last question for the entire event. For people that have been here since 9 a.m.
Real
no
quick,
pressure at all.
David Gooderman. I do insurance and I do wealth management. I work with a lot of serial entrepreneurs. I'm interested in what you're doing on biotech and life sciences, particularly angel investing in that area is something that really could be a focus. I wonder if you've thought about that. Working with Therabiologics, which is cancer-targeted drug delivery to cure brain cancer. These things take 5 or 10 years before there's a product for sale. What are your thoughts, and what do people on the board say about doing things in biotech and life science?
So we have a lot of people that are interested. In fact, the Kauffman Foundation has a lot of interest in the biotech and life sciences. It's a challenge because the development cycle is a lot longer, and the patient capital and the investment capital is a real challenge. We don't spend time targeting individual sectors. So what we try to do is to wrap and connect those companies that are in those sectors, both with each other, and try to drive access to the best knowledge, the best domain experience, the best sort of resources that can help them tackle the challenges that are unique to that industry. My own take on it is, as I've been traveling around the country, there's been a ton of advancement in the ability to much more quickly move a lot of these products to market than there was a decade ago. So a lot of the technology in the life sciences and biotech that's kind of the plumbing level stuff, like the genomics, for example, has moved to a place where we can do things in minutes and hours that would take months and years before. So I think a lot of that stuff, my own observation, is that that industry is about to go through a massive change because a lot of these basically lab technologies are catching up. There's a place called BioCurious. Can you guess where it is? Just outside of San Francisco. That actually is one of the only citizen labs in the country. And you can go in if you want to do your own genetics works and stuff. You literally have this entire laboratory that for $100 a month you can go access it. So sort of citizen science and citizen life science, the costs are starting to get to the place where it's not quite cloud computing in the infotech space, but it seems like we're on the edge of a transformation. It doesn't solve a company that's 5 years into it now and needs to go to the next 5 years, but I think the wave of companies that may be starting today might have a much shorter cycle time to getting to market and getting through it. And that's across the whole country.
So, Scott, thank you for coming out here tonight. You traveled a long way to be here. I think we can all say that we appreciate what you're doing to help all of us have more successful companies and make sure that we all benefit from each other's resources. So everyone, please join me in just saying thank you so much.
Thank you.